I walked into my husband's Boston boardroom with our 6-month-old daughter just as he prepared to sign our divorce. He stared at her dark eyes and whispered, "Why didn't you tell me we had a daughter?" I smiled bitterly. "I tried. Someone stopped you from hearing me." Then he opened the divorce agreement and realized someone had deliberately erased his child from his life. The second envelope had my name on it in my husband's handwriting, not typed, not printed on a label by some assistant. His hand, that cramped, left-leaning scrawl he'd had since prep school, the one his own mother called a doctor's signature on a banker's salary. My name, Sable Blackwood, and under it the address of the house on Chestnut Street I hadn't been allowed to enter in 14 months. There was a certified mail sticker on the corner, green edge, number 7019, and across the front, stamped in violet ink at an angle, 4 words that made my knees go soft: return to sender, refused. Everett was still holding it out toward me like it might bite one of us. "Sable," he said. His voice had gone to gravel. "I mailed this on November 4th. Clara shifted against my chest and made the small, wet, clicking sound she makes when she's deciding whether the world deserves her yet. I put my palm on her back and thought very clearly, don't drop her. Whatever this is, don't drop her. November 4th. I repeated. "The day after you called me the 3rd time." He swallowed. "I mailed it to the house because I didn't have another address for you. I never got it back. I assumed—" He stopped. His eyes moved past me to the marble table, to the 20 people who had come to watch a housewife sign her life away, and were now watching something else entirely. "I assumed you got it and didn't answer." I took it from him. It was heavy in a way paper alone isn't. 3 or 4 folded documents inside, and the seam along the top had been slit clean with a blade, then taped shut again with clear packing tape gone yellow at the edges. Somebody had opened it. Somebody had read it, resealed it, and marked it refused. I looked at the tape for a long time. It's a strange thing, what your brain decides to focus on when the floor tilts. Not the words. The tape. The little bubble of air trapped under it, the size of a grain of rice. Mrs. Blackwood, one of the FBI agents, had come back in. The second one, the woman who'd stayed by the door while the others took Vivian down. She had her hand slightly out. "That envelope may be evidence. I'd like to bag it before it's opened. It's been sitting in that woman's purse for 6 months. I said. "And you want to talk to me about chain of custody." Her jaw tightened, but not unkindly. "That's exactly why, ma'am. If we do this right, nobody gets to say later that you tampered with it." That landed. It was the first sentence anyone in a suit had said to me in a year that assumed I was a person who could be lied about rather than a person who was lying. So I let her open it. She snapped on blue nitrile gloves right there at the head of the table, under a spreadsheet still glowing on the wall about Q1E Bitta, and slid the contents out with a pen, laying them flat on the marble one by one. There were 3 documents. The first was a letter, 2 pages, both sides, in that same crooked handwriting. The second was a photocopy of a bank wire authorization, Meridian Benefit Solutions LLC, Wilmington, Delaware, for $184,000. Dated December 19th. The third had a state seal at the top and a case number in the corner and a title in bold sans serif that I had to read 4 times before the letters would hold still. Application for authorization of temporary involuntary hospitalization. My name was on it. Date of birth, height, weight, my mother's maiden name. Under basis for belief that failure to hospitalize would create a likelihood of serious harm, someone had typed a paragraph about a 34-year-old woman experiencing acute postpartum decompensation, persecutory ideation regarding family members, and refusal of prenatal care resulting in risk to a fetus. None of it happened. I never missed a prenatal appointment. I still have the cards in a shoebox because I'm the kind of person who keeps appointment cards. And at the bottom, in the box for the petitioner, the person swearing under the pains and penalties of perjury that all of it was true, was Everett's signature. Dated November 3rd, 11:40 p.m. 11:40 at night on November 3rd is roughly 40 minutes after I hung up the phone on my own husband, while sitting on the tile floor of a bathroom in a rented apartment in Quincy with blood on my legs, and roughly 2 hours before an ambulance took me to Brigham and Women's, where a resident with kind hands told me my daughter was coming at 29 weeks, whether any of us were ready or not. I made a sound. I don't know how to describe it except that it wasn't crying. Clara woke up and started to fuss. Everett had gone the color of the table. "That isn't mine," he said. "Sable, look at me. That is not my signature." "It's very good," I said. "It is not mine." "I know," I said. "That's what makes it so much worse. Because here's what I understood. Standing in that boardroom with my daughter's weight on my sternum and my husband's forged oath in front of me. If I had answered the door in Quincy that week, if the labor had come 3 days later, if I'd been home when they came, 2 men would have taken me out of my apartment in restraints, and there would have been no baby yet, and no record of a baby, and no one on earth who would have believed a word I said for the next 6 months. They didn't want the divorce. The divorce was the cover story. They wanted me erased first. Clara was just the part of the plan that arrived early. I didn't didn't sign anything that day. Everett's general counsel, a man named Douglas Prentice, who had spent the entire meeting looking at his cufflinks, said something about pausing execution of the agreement pending review. Somebody said the word disclosure. Somebody said 8K. A woman from investor relations was already typing with her thumbs. I stood up. Clara was full-on crying now. That thin, outraged wail of hers, and the acoustics in that room were designed for quarterly earnings, not for a 6-month-old, and it bounced off the glass until it sounded like there were 4 of her. Sable, wait. Everett said, please, let me. I have to feed her, I said. There's nowhere in this building to feed her. There's a wellness room on 12, but it's badge access, and I don't have a badge because I'm nobody, because nobody invited me to this meeting. He flinched like I'd hit him. Good. I fed her in the stairwell between 49 and 50, on a concrete step with my back against a fire door, and I want to be honest about the part people leave out when they tell this later. I was not triumphant. I did not feel like a woman who had just detonated a 50-floor building. My hands were shaking so hard I had to press my elbow against my ribs to keep her steady, and I was doing the math I'd been doing every day for 6 months, which was $412 in checking, $186 in the envelope in the freezer. WIC covers the formula through the end of the month. The Civic needs an inspection sticker by the 30th. The FBI arresting a woman in a red suit does not put an inspection sticker on a 2009 Honda Civic. That's the thing nobody tells you about justice. It's a slow-release medication. The pain comes off the shelf immediately. The relief takes about a year. I'd been an architect. That's not a flourish. It's the whole shape of what happened to me. Nothing glamorous. Structural documentation for a mid-size firm in Fort Point, mostly adaptive reuse, old mill buildings getting turned into labs. I liked the part where you take something built for one life and make it hold a completely different one without lying about what it used to be. I met Everett Blackwood at a groundbreaking in Somerville, in a rented tent, in the rain. He was there because his family's holding company was an equity partner in half of East Cambridge. I was there because I'd drawn the seismic retrofit. He asked me a genuinely intelligent question about lateral load and then admitted he'd read it off a card in his pocket. We got married 11 months later. His mother, Adelaide Blackwood, 71 at the time, wore gray to the wedding and told the photographer to take the family portrait before I finished getting dressed. When I brought it up later, gently, laughing, she said, "Oh, sweetheart, you'd have been in it if you'd been ready." That's the whole woman in one sentence. She never said an unkind thing to me in 4 years. She just kept arranging the world so that I was late for it. I stopped working 18 months in. Nobody held a gun to my head. It was 100 small pressures. The travel, the dinners, the way, "So what do you do?" became a question I had to answer twice at every event because the first answer never took. My license lapsed in a year. I didn't notice it lapsing. That one's mine. I'll carry it. By month 30, Vivian Cross had been promoted to chief of staff, and my husband and I had stopped having conversations longer than 11 minutes. I know the number because near the end I started timing them on my phone, the way you time a contraction, trying to figure out if this was the real thing or just my body practicing. The red flags, in order, since everyone always wants them in order. He started forwarding my texts to Vivian to get them on the calendar. Adelaide asked me twice, in one summer, whether I'd ever been evaluated, as in, has anyone ever sat down with you professionally, dear, because your mother's family had that streak. My mother had died of a stroke at 58. There was no streak. There was a woman who worked doubles at Beth Israel for 30 years and didn't take her blood pressure medication because it made her dizzy on the floor. And in February of that last year, Everett came home and told me the family trust was doing a structural review in the fall. And did I know that under the 1974 instrument, a child born of the marriage vests as a beneficiary at birth, not at 18, at birth, automatically. He said it the way you'd mention a parking regulation. I said, huh. I was 6 weeks pregnant that night and hadn't told him yet, because I'd had a miscarriage the year before and I wanted to make it past 10 weeks before I said it out loud. That is the single detail I'd change if I could change one. Not the fight, not the leaving, just the 2 weeks I sat on it. Because in those 2 weeks, Adelaide's estate attorney sent a memo to the trustees, and Vivian Cross read it, and by the time I said the words, "I'm pregnant," to my husband in a kitchen in Beacon Hill, there were already people building a room I would spend the next year and a half trying to get out of. The letter. The FBI let me photograph it before they bagged it. Agent Reyes, Marisol Reyes, Financial Crimes, and I never did thank her properly for this, held the pages flat with 2 gloved fingers and stood there patiently while I took 9 pictures with a cracked phone screen. I read it that night in Quincy, sitting on the floor of the bathroom, because that's apparently where I do the big things. Clara was asleep in the pack and play. The laundromat downstairs was running its last cycles and the whole floor hummed. Sable. I've written this 4 times. The other 3 are in the fireplace, which tells you what kind of week I'm having. You called me on the 3rd. Sable. I've written this 4 times. The other 3 are in the fireplace, which tells you what kind of week I'm having. You called me on the 3rd at 11:02 p.m., and I want to tell you exactly what I heard, because I think it matters and because I've been trying to reconstruct it it for 24 hours. I heard you say, something's wrong. I heard you say, I'm bleeding. And then I heard V say, over my shoulder, that this was the 4th call this month and that Dr. Lindqvist had flagged escalating somatic complaints, and she put a piece of paper in front of me that I did not read, and I said the thing I said to you, which I am not going to repeat here because if I write it down, I'm going to have to look at it. You hung up. She took the phone out of my hand. I called Lindqvist myself yesterday morning. There is no Dr. Lindqvist. There's a Dr. Lundgren at the Chestnut Hill practice who has never met you and who told me, and I quote, that his office does not release patient information to spouses' assistants and that no one from my office has ever contacted him. I don't know what I'm standing in the middle of. I know it's mine. I know I built half of it by not asking a single hard question in 3 years, because the answers were handed to me pre-chewed and I liked how easy that was. Do not sign anything my mother's office sends you. Do not sign anything with the name Prentice on it. If a doctor or an officer comes to your door, don't open it. Call Ray Delacroix, the only lawyer in this city who has never taken a dollar from us. His cell is at the bottom of this page. I'm coming to Quincy on Friday. I got the address from the pharmacy, which I'm aware is illegal, and I don't care. I don't expect you to forgive me on Friday. I'd like to be in the same room as you when you decide not to. E. There was a phone number at the bottom, in a different pen. I called it at 12:40 in the morning. It rang once and went to a recording. The number you have dialed has been disconnected. Ray Delacroix had died in March, 58 years old, 41 years at the Suffolk County Bar, known for representing plaintiffs against institutions considerably larger than himself. I sat there with the phone in my lap and I laughed. Not because it was funny, because my body ran out of other options. Everett came to Quincy that Friday. He stood outside a building I wasn't living in yet, because on Friday, November 7th, I was on the 4th floor of Brigham and Women's, watching a nurse tape a feeding tube to my daughter's cheek, and the apartment lease didn't start until December. He knocked on the door of a woman named Delphine Aubert, who had sublet me a room for 3 weeks, and told him, exactly as I'd asked her to tell anyone who came looking, that she'd never heard of me. I'd asked her to say that. I have to live with that one too. Here's what 6 months of hospital billing looks like when someone has quietly set fire to your life. Clara was born at 11:52 p.m. on November 3rd, 29 weeks and 4 days, 3 pounds, 1 ounce, 25 days on a ventilator, 49 in the NICU at Brigham and Women's, and the woman who kept her alive was Dr. Amara Osi, attending neonatologist, 16 years, who has a way of saying, we're going to have a boring night, that I still hear when I can't sleep. The first denial letter came on December 22nd. Ventilator days. Coverage terminated retroactive to March 14th. Amount owed $311 to $4.68. I called the number and got a man named Kyle, who told me my plan had been moved to a new administrator called Meridian Benefit Solutions. When I asked when, he said, and I wrote it down at 2:47 p.m. on the back of a NICU parking voucher. It looks like the termination was backdated by the group, ma'am. That's a plan sponsor action. I can't reverse a plan sponsor action. The plan sponsor was Blackwood Holdings. The signature on the plan amendment was Everett's. I want you to understand that at this point in the story, I believed my husband had done it, all of it. I had a forged letter I hadn't received, a phone call where he'd called my terror a liability, and a document with his name on it that had cut the insurance out from under a 3-pound baby on a ventilator. If you'd asked me on Christmas Eve, I'd have told you he was the worst person I had ever met. So I did what everyone does. I tried to fix it quietly. I emailed his assistant. Bounced. I called the main line, and a pleasant woman told me he was in Zurich until January 8th. I sent a certified letter, which I now know was signed for by V. Cross at 9:14 a.m. on January 6th, because that's what the green card says. And I still have it. And on January 11th, a man in a very good coat came to the NICU family lounge with a folder. Douglas Prentice, General Counsel, Blackwood Holdings, 28 years, silver hair, that particular Boston accent that costs money to acquire. He bought me a coffee from the machine, which was a $1.75 investment in what he wanted to accomplish that afternoon. He said the family was prepared to be extremely generous in a difficult moment. He put a check on the table, $250,000. Next to it, an 11-page document with a section on page 6 titled, Acknowledgement Regarding Issue. I read page 6 twice. It said I acknowledged that no child had been born of the marriage, that any minor in my care was not the biological issue of Everett J. Blackwood, that I waived on behalf of myself and that minor all claims under the Blackwood Family Trust, dated June 1974, and that I agreed not to seek or accept genetic testing establishing paternity. $250,000 to swear my daughter was nobody's. I sat in a chair with a vinyl seat that squeaked, 40 feet from an isolette where her oxygen saturation was hovering at 88%, and I did the math a person is not supposed to admit to doing. That money would have cleared the NICU bill and left me 2 years of breathing room. I want to be honest. I sat with it for a full minute, then I asked him one question. Who typed page 6? He said, I'm not going to answer that. I said, because Everett didn't. Everett doesn't know the word issue. He'd say kids. And Douglas Prentice, 28 years, silver silver hair, a man who has probably never once raised his voice, did a thing with his mouth, just a small tightening at one corner. Half a second. That was the first crack. That was the moment the whole thing stopped being a story about a man who abandoned me and started being a story about a machine that had been running for a year with my husband's name printed on the side of it. I said no. He left the check on the table like he was sure I'd come running. I sat there and looked at it for a long time, and then I gave it to the nurse at the desk and asked her to put it in the lost and found. She said, "Honey, this is a check for $250,000. I said, "Then it'll be easy to describe." That night I did the only smart thing I did that entire winter. I stopped trying to be believed and started trying to be documented. I'm an architect, or I was. Buildings don't fall down because of the big load. They fall down because somebody didn't detail the connection between two things that were each individually fine. So I stopped arguing about who my husband was and started drawing the connections. I bought a composition notebook at the CVS on Cambridge Street, 219. I still have it. Every call went in it. Date, time, name, badge, or extension, exact words and quotation marks when I could get them. I requested my complete medical record from Brigham under HIPAA. It's a form. It takes 30 days and nobody can stop you. It came in a box. I requested Clara's. I pulled every explanation of benefits going back 3 years. And on February 9th, at a kitchen table in Quincy with a laundromat rumbling underneath me, I found the thing that broke it open. It wasn't dramatic at all. It was a routing number. The Meridian Premium Remittance account and the vendor account Blackwood Holdings had been paying $46,000 a month since the previous April for third-party administration and stop-loss brokerage were the same account, same routing, last for 8827. Meridian had been incorporated in Delaware 14 months earlier under a registered agent service, but the Massachusetts foreign entity filing, public, free, 4 minutes to pull, listed a manager of record, V. Cross, 214 Beacon St., Boston, MA. She hadn't just denied my daughter's claims. She'd built a company to do it, and she'd been billing my husband's company $46,000 a month for the privilege, and every claim she refused to pay was money that stayed inside a thing she owned. Clara's ventilator days weren't collateral damage. They were revenue. I threw up in the kitchen sink. Then I photographed all of it and emailed it to myself, to Delphine, and to a paralegal I'd known in my Fort Point life named Marcus Bell, who wrote back in 9 minutes, "Sable, don't send this to anyone else. Don't call the company. I'm giving you a name." The name was Special Agent Daniel Okafor, FBI Boston Field Office, Financial Crimes Squad, 11 years. I met him on February 20th at a Dunkin' on Congress Street because I refused to walk into a federal building with a baby, and he didn't blink at that. 6'4", coffee black. The first thing he said, after he sat down, was, "Before we start, is she doing okay? The baby." I said, "She's on a 1/4 liter of oxygen at night." He said, "My son was 31 weeks. He's 9 now. He plays the trumpet badly." Then he opened a notebook. "Okay, start at the routing number, not at the marriage. I know that's backwards for you. Trust me, 4 months. That's how long it took from that Dunkin' to the boardroom. 4 months of subpoenas I wasn't allowed to know about, of nursing a baby at 3 a.m., and refreshing a docket that showed nothing, because sealed things show nothing. Agent Okafor told me exactly one thing during that entire period in March over the phone. "Mrs. Blackwood, the thing you should understand is that people who do this are almost never doing it alone, and they are almost always keeping a record of the person they're doing it with. Insurance. Everybody thinks they're the one holding the leash." I didn't know what he meant then. I found out in a courtroom in June. 9 days after the boardroom, at 6:15 on a Thursday evening, a woman knocked on my door in Quincy and introduced herself as a response worker from the Department of Children and Families. Her name was Nora Whitfield, LICSW, 19 years, and she was carrying a clipboard and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "There's been a 51A report," she said. "Anonymous. I have to come in. I'm sorry." I let her in. I had a bottle warming on the counter and a load of Clara's sleepers in a basket by the door and the composition notebook open on the table because I'd been logging a call with the hospital's billing department. She walked the apartment. 4 minutes. Crib, outlet covers, fridge, the medication on the shelf. She asked to see Clara's pediatric records, which I handed her in a labeled folder, because by then everything I owned was in a labeled folder. "May I ask what the report alleged?" She hesitated the way people do when they're about to break a small rule for a good reason. Caller stated the mother has an untreated psychiatric condition, that she removed an infant from medical care against advice, and that there's an active hospitalization order she's evading. I said, "There is." She looked up sharply. "There's a Section 12 application with my name on it," I said. "Filed November 3rd. My husband's woman's signature is forged on it. The woman who filed it was arrested by the FBI 9 days ago, and it is sitting in a courthouse somewhere in this state, and no one will tell me if it's still alive. Nora Whitfield put down her pen. She said, Mrs. Blackwood, I've been doing this 19 years, and I'm not on anyone's side except that child's. Do you have any idea how many anonymous 51As I get in a month that are somebody's ex-husband? No, a lot. She picked her pen back up. But I still have to walk the apartment. That's how the real ones get found. Do you understand why I can't just take your word? And here's the thing that made me trust her. She waited for me to actually answer. She didn't move on. I said, yes. She wrote for a while. Then, the apartment is fine, the baby is thriving. I'm going to write it up as unsupported, and I'm going to note the pending federal matter. She stood. At the door, she turned around. But the Section 12 is a problem. Those don't die on their own. Somebody has to kill it. Get a lawyer today. I got one the next morning. Priya Raghunathan, family law. 22 years, a 2-room office over a dry cleaner in Dorchester. She read 9 pages of my notebook without speaking, then took off her glasses. Do you know what you've done here? Made a mess. You've made a record. She tapped the page. Time, name, extension, exact quote. Most of my clients come to me with a feeling. You came with an exhibit list. She filed to vacate the Section 12 application on May 19th. It was denied on procedural grounds 9 days later. The application had been filed in another county, where the clerk's office had it flagged pending physician certification, neither alive nor dead, which meant that if any licensed physician in the Commonwealth signed the certification page, an order would issue automatically, an officer would take me in for evaluation, and Clara, with father unknown, on her birth certificate, because I'd come into that hospital unconscious and alone, would go into emergency DCF custody while I proved I wasn't crazy. Everett tried to fix it. I'll give him that. He tried for 3 weeks. He filed an affidavit disavowing the signature. Denied, because an affidavit from an interested party isn't proof of forgery. He went to the trustees to make the family's outside counsel withdraw. The trustees informed him, in writing, that under the 1974 instrument he was a beneficiary, not a fiduciary, and that petitions filed in the trust's interest were the trustee's business. The trustee since 2009 was his mother. He called me the night he found that out. It was 11:20 p.m. I remember because I'd just gotten Clara down. She told me it was a formality, he said. His voice sounded sanded. In November, she sat in my kitchen and told me you were unwell, that they were getting you help. And Sable, I let her. I didn't sign it, but I sat there and let her say it, and I never asked one question. I know, that's not better. No, I said, it isn't. But it's true. And I'm done throwing away true things because they aren't enough. There was a long silence on that phone. Then he said, whatever this costs. Whatever it takes. I'm not asking you to let me back in. I'm telling you I'm going to be standing there whether you want me or not. I said, then get me your mother's calendar. They came at 2:47 in the morning on June 11th. 2 Quincy PD cruisers and an ambulance with its lights on but no siren, which somehow was worse. Blue light going around and around the ceiling of a room where a 7-month-old was sleeping. A physician's certification had been signed the previous afternoon by a psychiatrist who had never met me. He'd been handed a collateral history by a family representative and certified on the strength of it, which is legal, which is the part I still can't get over. The order issued at 4:15 p.m. Nobody told my lawyer, because nobody has to. I called Priya from the hallway with my phone shaking against my ear. She answered on the second ring at 2:49 in the morning and said one word, speaker. Then she talked to a Quincy PD sergeant named Michael Ferreira for 6 minutes, while I stood in a doorway holding my daughter, and while a paramedic very kindly asked me whether there was anyone who could take the baby tonight. There wasn't. Delphine was in Montreal. My mother was dead. Sergeant Ferreira listened. Then he looked at the order. Then he looked at me, barefoot, holding a baby, wearing a Fort Point Architects t-shirt from 2016, and did the thing that saved us. He called his shift commander and said, I've got a federal matter and a possible fraudulent instrument, and I'm not comfortable executing until someone above me looks at it. He stayed in my kitchen until 5:40 a.m. and drank a cup of my coffee. At one point, he said quietly, my sister went through something, not this, something. That's all he said. At 8:30 a.m., a duty judge stayed the order for 72 hours pending an emergency hearing. 72 hours. Priya said it plainly. Standing in my kitchen with Clara on her hip like she'd been holding babies her whole life. In 72 hours, we either prove the November 3rd signature is forged, or that order goes back into effect. And if it goes back into effect, DCF takes her, and I will fight it, and I will probably win, and it will take 4 to 7 months. 4 to 7 months. She would have been over a year old. She would have learned to walk somewhere else. I didn't have a panic attack. What I had was stupider. I went into the bathroom and folded every towel in the apartment. All 11. Twice. My hands needed a job, and my brain had gone somewhere with no windows. Then I came out and said, "Who's the best document examiner in New England and how much do they cost?" Her name was Dr. Helen Vasquez Ruiz, board-certified forensic document examiner, ABFDE, 26 years, formerly of the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, rush fee $4,800, half upfront, 6-week waiting list. I had $412.71 hours. I told her the truth in about 90 seconds because I'd gotten very good at 90 seconds. She was quiet a moment, then, "Send me the exemplars, 20 known signatures minimum, contemporaneous. Originals if you have them. I'll bill you when you have it." That could be never. "I've been doing this since 1998, Mrs. Blackwood. I've testified for insurance companies 1,100 times. Let me have one." Everett drove 22 original documents down from Beacon Hill at midnight. Mortgage writers, passport applications, a 2019 will, a birthday card he'd written me in the second year of our marriage that I did not know he'd kept a copy of. She worked for 31 hours. She found it in the first 6, she told me later, and spent the other 25 making sure. A forgery isn't caught by the shape of the letters. It's caught by the speed. A real signature is a motor habit, ballistic, written faster than the conscious mind can steer. A forgery is a drawing. Under magnification, you can see where the pen stopped and started, where the writer lifted to check the model, where the line tremors like someone on a balance beam. The November 3rd signature had 11 pen lifts. Everett's genuine signature, across 22 documents and 6 years, had 2. There was one more thing. The PDF the county had on file, which Priya pulled off the clerk's electronic docket for a $12 certification fee, listed the authoring workstation as BHXX04, Vivian's machine, but the document properties listed something else. Company, Prentice and Hale, LLP. And the template matched a form that firm had used in exactly one prior filing in the Commonwealth, a 2011 guardianship petition against a woman named Rosalind Blackwood, Everett's aunt, Adelaide's younger sister, committed for 11 weeks in 2011, 3 months before a trust succession vote. She'd done it before. She'd done it in 2011, and it had worked so well that nobody had ever had to think about Rosalind again. 2 days before the hearing, Agent Okafor called me. "Vivian Cross wants to proffer," he said. Meaning what? Meaning her attorney reached out. She wants a 5K1 letter, a recommendation for a reduced sentence, in exchange for cooperation. She says she has recordings. A pause. She says she has 3 years of them. I sat down on the floor of my kitchen. Clara was in her high chair smashing a banana into geology. How much does it take off? That's not my call. But realistically, she's looking at 51 to 63 months. With substantial assistance, could be half that. Could be less. Half. Vivian Cross built a company whose business model was refusing to pay for the oxygen going into my daughter's lungs. She listened to me beg on a phone and laughed. She kept a letter from my husband in her purse for 6 months the way other people keep a lipstick. And I was being asked whether I'd trade half her sentence for a tape. Priya said, "Legally, it isn't your call, but the U.S. attorney weighs victim impact, and if you scream, it matters. Give me until morning." I didn't sleep. At 4 a.m., I stood over the pack and play with my hand hovering, waiting to see the ribs move. She was on her back with both arms up over her head like she'd been arrested in a dream. I thought about 4 to 7 months. I thought about learning to walk somewhere else. And I understood something that I think is the only genuinely useful thing I learned that year. Revenge and safety are 2 different products, and they are almost never on sale at the same time. You get to buy one. I called Okafor at 6:15 a.m. "Take the deal," I said, "but I want a condition." She hands over everything. Every file, every recording, every device, and she does it before Thursday's hearing, not after. If she holds one thing back for leverage, it's off. He said, "That's actually a reasonable ask." I said, "I have a very good lawyer, and I fold towels when I'm scared." The emergency hearing was Thursday, June 14th, 9 a.m. Suffolk Probate and Family Court, 24 New Chardon Street, before the Honorable Eleanor Paget. Everett sat behind me, not beside, behind. He'd asked, and I'd said behind, and he took it without a word. Dr. Vasquez Ruiz testified for 51 minutes with photographic enlargements marked Exhibits C through K. She put the 11 pen lifts up on a screen at 8 times magnification, and she said the sentence that ended it. "In 26 years, I have never rendered an unqualified opinion of simulation on the strength of tremor alone. I'm rendering one today." The question signature was not written by the writer of the known standards. There is no ambiguity here. Dr. Amara Osei testified for 9 minutes about a 3-pound infant, 25 ventilator days, and a mother who was present for every one of them, and who logged her daughter's oxygen saturations in a composition notebook because it helped her feel useful. Nora Whitfield testified that the 51A was unsupported, and that the anonymous caller's number had been traced by subpoena to a prepaid phone bought at a CVS on Boylston Street on May 14th at 4:52 p.m., 9 days after the boardroom. And then, at 11:40, the Assistant U.S. Attorney's Office, who were there as a courtesy, because a probate hearing and a federal indictment are different animals, asked leave to play 41 seconds of a recording, produced produced by a cooperating witness, dated April 2nd of the prior year. The courtroom sound system was terrible. It didn't matter. A woman's voice, thin and pleasant and unhurried, the voice that once told a photographer to go ahead without me. The trust review is in October. A child born of the marriage vests at birth, Vivian, at birth, which means if she carries to term, we are having a very different conversation with the trustees, and I will not have this family's 40 years handed to a woman who draws parking garages. So the mother needs a diagnosis before the mother needs a delivery room. The child cannot exist on paper. Do you understand me? Not on the plan, not on the certificate, not on the trust. Garages. So the mother needs a diagnosis before the mother needs a delivery room. The child cannot exist on paper. Do you understand me? Not on the plan, not on the certificate, not on the trust. Handle it before October and never speak to me about it again. 41 seconds. Behind me, I heard Everett make a sound I hope I never hear from another human being. Judge Paget vacated the Section 12 order from the bench. She called it a fraud upon this court of a kind I have seen perhaps twice in 19 years, and referred the 2011 Rosalind Blackwood guardianship for review sua sponte, a thing judges can do and almost never do. Adelaide Blackwood, 72, was indicted 11 weeks later on 9 federal counts, plus state charges for filing a false instrument and perjury. Her attorneys argued her age. The court noted that her age had not prevented her from placing the April 2nd call. She took a plea in February, 40 months. Vivian Cross pled to wire fraud and aggravated identity theft, 31 months, plus the mandatory 2 years consecutive on the identity theft count, which her lawyer had somehow failed to explain to her. Meridian was dissolved. Restitution was set at $2.1 million, of which I'll realistically see 9%. Douglas Prentice surrendered his license rather than face a Board of Bar Overseers hearing. His firm dissolved in April. The Globe ran it on a Sunday. The child cannot exist on paper. Inside, the Blackwood family's campaign against its own heir. 9,000 words. My name is in it 11 times, and I have never read past the 4th paragraph. Everett resigned as CEO before the board could vote. He kept about a third of what he had. The trust was reformed under a corporate trustee, and on a Tuesday in September, a bank in Rhode Island sent a 1-page letter to a 4th-floor walk-up in Quincy confirming that Clara Josephine Blackwood, DOB November 3rd, had been recorded as a vested beneficiary as of her date of birth. They had spent, by the government's accounting, roughly $1.4 million trying to prevent that letter from existing. It cost 32 cents to mail, 14 months later. Clara walks now. Badly, gloriously, like a tiny drunk headed somewhere important. She's off oxygen. Dr. Osei signed her off in October, then stood in the hallway and cried for a second and told me she was allergic to the building. I renewed my license, sat the exams again at 36 with a toddler at home, which I do not recommend, and passed on the second try, which I also do not recommend. There's a firm now, 2 of us, me and a structural engineer named Delphine Aubert, who once told a very rich man she'd never heard of me. Adaptive reuse. Old buildings, new lives, no lying about what they used to be. Everett has Wednesdays and every other weekend. He's a better father than he was a husband, he knows it, and he has never once asked me to convert that into forgiveness. In August, he sold the house on Chestnut Street. He didn't tell me until it was done. I don't hate him. That surprised me more than anything else in this story. What I have instead is smaller and heavier. I know exactly how much of my life was lost to a man being handed his answers pre-chewed, and I will never again be in a room where I'm the one being described instead of asked. The first restitution disbursement was $38,000. I spent 11 of it on a lease deposit and a brass sign for a door on the 2nd floor of a converted shoe factory in Fort Point. Adelaide said the child could not exist on paper, not on the plan, not on the certificate, not on the trust. So I had my daughter's name cut into 3/8-inch brass and bolted to a door on a public street in the city her grandmother owned a piece of, where the mail carrier reads it every morning at 9:40, and nobody has ever once asked me to prove she's real. Rhodes and Aubert, Suite 204. And under it, in smaller letters, the name of the firm's youngest and least useful partner, who cannot yet write her own signature, but who will only ever have to learn it once.